I'm Tenitra Batiste, and Falcons organization, you have one job. Actually, you kind of have three jobs: head coach, GM, president of football operations. To get right, get to it.
I'm Aaron Freeman, and they got three jobs to get right. They're bound to get at least one of them right, right?
I'm Jarvis Davis, and all they need is to hire me, and I'll make sure they get it right.
Rise up, A-Town. It's the Falcons Squad. Everything Atlanta Falcons every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from the ATL. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Straight from the ATL, the Falcons Squad Show starts now.
Welcome into the Falcons Squad Show, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me, our Locked On Falcons host, Aaron Freeman, and Locked On analyst, Jarvis Davis. The Squad Show is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. And today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. So we will allow you guys, and we will too, to be the GM. We'll put on our hats and make some decisions for these Falcons because, hey, it looks like they might need our help. Also, there are currently a quarter of the teams in the NFL that are in need of head coaches, but is the one in Atlanta one of the better jobs? We'll download on that as well. And now that Raheem Morris has moved on, the question is, can he move on to greener pastures at the helm of another team? We will discuss. But first things first, Jarvis, the Falcons are heading into this offseason, as we all mentioned in the opening, with 3 openings: head coach, GM, and president of football operations. Which one or 2 or all 3 do you feel the Falcons have the best chance of getting the hire right with? Starting with, which one do you think they have the best chance of getting right? But do you even think that there is a strong chance they'll get all 2 or maybe even hit the trifecta and get all 3 of them right?
Ooh, that's a loaded question, T.
That's right.
So let me start with the head coach, because I feel like that's probably going to be the most important right now, because just given, and I know we're going to talk about it later with the whole Michael Penix situation, but I think that with having just coming out of a defensive head coach, I feel like, I'm not saying you have to hire an offensive head coach, but I feel like there has to be some semblance of a guy who understands what it takes to develop a quarterback, right? Yes. And most of the time, that's going to be an offensive-minded quarterback. Mm-hmm. And if a guy that's defensive-minded, if he blows your socks off, sure, that's a whole nother conversation. But I feel like when you're talking about getting the guy that's already on this roster to the level where you feel he needs to be to have success, because he already has pieces, right? He already has the tools. We saw that in the 4-game winning streak. We saw the tools. So I feel like it's set up for the head coach for them to get the head coach right, because the weapons that they have on the offensive side of the football, the roster that you already have on the defensive side of the football. Of course, you're going to have to make some decisions about a couple of guys who are free agents. But I think the foundation of your defense is pretty much here, right? Mm-hmm. So I feel like the head coach can be set up pretty nicely for them to get that right out of all of those 3.
Okay, so you feel like the best shot for this organization to get it right is to get that they will get the head coach correct.
Sure.
Okay, absolutely. What about you, Free? Which one, head coach, GM, president of football operations, do you think this Falcons organization has the best chance to get right?
Well, I agree with Jarvis that I think if they hit on the head coach, that's going to do the most good for this football team, because when you just look around the league and you just see like the best teams are the teams that are the most well-coached teams around the league. But because of how important and critical that is to your success, I think it's the highest bar to clear. And so I'm skeptical of whether or not the Falcons will get that right, just because we haven't really seen them consistently get that right over the years. Mm-hmm. So for me, with the president of football job seemingly going to Matt Ryan, we'll see. It's not meant to knock on Matt Ryan, but because that's just a brand new job with a brand new role, it's hard for me to know if that's they're going to get that right, even if they don't hire Matt Ryan and go in another direction. So for me, I kind of look at the GM job as the one that's probably the most likely job that they can hit on. You know, it's interesting because it's probably the job where we know the least amount of who they're looking for in that. So that's probably also fueling it a little bit for me. But I do think that job is just because it's a much more traditional role. It doesn't have sort of as much pressure to get everything right, you know, particularly on Sunday, you know, those 17 Sundays a year. The GM job is much more of a long-term sort of strategy. And again, we'll see how it all plays out, but you hear that the Falcons are potentially interested in someone like an Ian Cunningham, the assistant Bears GM, for that job. He's, I believe, entering tomorrow for the president of football, but it's kind of like killing two birds with one stone with that. You know, and he comes from that background of like the Ravens and the Eagles, which is a, you know, I've termed it on Locked On Falcons is much more of a data-driven process when it comes to the draft, which is we're going to trade back, we're going to accumulate assets. You know, we believe that our success drafting, you know, in Baltimore and Philadelphia is based off of getting more swings of the bat than necessarily having that more conviction-based approach that Terry Fontenot had, which is we believe that we know how to get the right players. And at times, Terry and them were right when it came to that stuff, Bijan Robinson, James Pierce, et cetera. And at other times, you can question whether or not they had the right conviction with certain players and whatnot. So, you know, I think that role, because if you can just kind of do the opposite of what Terry Fontenot winds up doing, I think that's more likely for the Falcons to get that right this time around. So I think the GM job is probably the role that I feel like probably has a lower bar to clear, but also I think is much easier to clear given the potential quality of candidates out there.
Yeah. So Jarvis, let me ask you this. We're saying that you believe that the Falcons have the best shot of getting the head coach right. Aaron believes that the Falcons have the best shot of getting the GM right. But I think it's probably the most important for them to get that president of football operations right, if that's where the final decision-making rests amongst that triumvirate once it's all said and done, right? And so it's interesting that we all three think maybe slightly differently about where they have their best shot of getting it right, or maybe where they need to get it right. But let me ask you this. When you look at those three positions and you look at the success rate, we'll call it, of this Falcons organization, even before president of football operations existed, is there anything that makes you believe that this is the time, this is the round, this is the moment that the Falcons are at least going to get 2 out of 3 right, if not all 3? Because really and truly, I think you're at a point and place in this franchise where you really need to hit on all 3.
Yeah. I'm encouraged simply because of the structure, right? Because I look at how they've been operating, and all of the guys or the head coach and the general manager report to Arthur, and they let him know how they see things and how they see how things go, and he tell them why things went a certain way and all that stuff, right? He can take all that information in and then make a decision. Sure. That's cool. But now you have a football guy, a guy who can understand that language, a guy who can call out, yeah, that's BS. No, that wasn't right. You know, when you say something that's, you know, that's red flaggish, you know, he can call that stuff out. He can say, man, no, that's not right. Why would you do that way? And I think that when you have a football guy in the position to evaluate what your head coach and general manager are doing as a tandem, and he can compartmentalize what those guys are doing as well and say, all right, Rob, the game management, all that stuff was crap. Or I can say, Terry, I don't understand what are you thinking when you drafted a tight end in the highest drafted tight end in NFL draft history. Like, what were you thinking behind that? Because I don't think that XYZ, or he can do it before he's thinking like, hey, oh, here's what I'm thinking. No, I don't think we need to go that route. And here's why. And then you can have a conversation talking strictly ball and not really necessarily worried about trying to convince the guy who's going to fire me whether or not I can keep my job. So I think it's just a matter of communication and a matter of understanding the vision and then helping to execute that. Because the one thing that really stood out to me in that presser was right at the end when, you know, Arthur Blank talked about what surprised him the most about the report that he got back at the end of their interviews and everything. He said that the lack of vision, the lack of clarity, that hit hard. That hit hard because I was just like, okay, some of the things when it comes to the draft and some of the things when it comes to the quarterback, like all of your actions kind of spoke to, okay, like where are you going? I don't see where you're going. I don't follow. I said that plenty of times.
Yes,
with certain decisions. Like,
can I say this, Bill Jarvis? Can I just give you credit for that? You and also Aaron have mentioned that a number of times. So I just wanted to kind of say, like, that's nothing new to us.
Sure.
Here at Squad Show or at Locked On Falcons, because there were questions even dating back to the first season under Raheem Morris, along with Terry Fontenot, whether you want to look at the larger picture of Kirk Cousins, followed up by Michael Penix Jr., or many other decisions on this. Like, I just wanted to say this isn't anything new because you two, and even Maria, Tori, me, like this whole squad crew had kind of scratched their heads, but the two of you in particular scratched your heads long ago about understanding the vision and the direction.
You know what? And I think that, you know, that's the reason why, a month ago, well apparently the Falcons were listening to Locked On Falcons, or they were projecting what Locked On Falcons was going to come up with, because they've been doing this for 2 months.
Yeah.
They went through they interviewed everybody, except for the coaching staff, you know, everybody in the front office and Ra and Terry and all that stuff. They interviewed everybody and they came back with this, they came to this conclusion. And I think that, you know, having a president of football in place, working in conjunction with those two guys and having him report to president of football, and then he being that buffer between those two and Arthur Blank, I like that. I feel like you can set yourself up for success. Now, granted, they still have to go out and get the right people in to be able to do that. But I feel like you're setting yourself up for success when you have the head coach and general manager answering to a football guy, not the boss cutting the checks. I feel like that gives me a little bit more operational peace. We're going to still continue to use that phrase because I like that. I like Ra's thinking when it comes to the whole operational piece. So there's operational piece, at least from a structure standpoint at this moment.
Yeah. And for you, Aaron, do you see a way, do you have any optimism, I'll use Jarvis's term, about this organization at this point getting to, if I know we all believe they should at least get one right. We talked about which one they should get right, but do you have optimism that the Falcons will get it right for 2 or 3 of these openings?
I mean, people know I'm never optimistic about the Atlanta Falcons. You know? Like, I'm not going to sit here and lie to folks and tell you that I'm optimistic about the Atlanta Falcons. I think I can see a path. Basically, I think they can get it right, T. Ooh. Whether we get to a point where I feel
optimism for you,
you know, where I feel like, oh, they're getting this right, remains to be seen. That's where, like, I can't say I'm optimistic because I don't feel it. I'm just like, yeah, they could get it right. They could absolutely hire the right 3 people. They could absolutely end this, 8-year playoff drought, coming out of the gates, and we'll be sitting here celebrating, this time next year, getting geared up to play the Green Bay Packers or whoever we're playing in the first round of the playoffs or something like that. But there's absolutely a path for that. But to me, until we get to see who those hires are, and again, going back to what we were talking about at the top, the coach is such a critical part of it. Until that person gets hired, it's going to be hard for me to feel like, oh, like this is all going to work, because there's a world where, they hire Matt Ryan as the president of football. They hire a first-time head coach, a first-time GM, and it's like all of these people are rookies in their jobs. They've never done what they're being asked to do before, And it's at that point in time, like it could work out. And we've seen many instances where that has worked out very well for teams. Obviously, most of the successful teams, the people that succeeded or are currently succeeding, were doing the job for the first time. And they were able to be success. The Falcons could go the retread route, right? Where it's like, oh, well, we got this new president of football, but we definitely want to hire an experienced coach, an experienced GM. And, that gives you a little bit more confidence that those guys can do the job because they've done it before, but it doesn't guarantee that they're going to do the job well. There's a reason why people are out of jobs and get that second opportunity because they didn't quite do the job correctly the first time, or at least when you talk about, say, a John Harbaugh at the end, things didn't go quite the way that organization wanted it to go. And sort of, you hire John Harbaugh, just to use him as an example, like the assumption is going to be, oh, he's gonna give us what he gave the Ravens for those first, 5 seasons where they made the playoffs every single year and ultimately culminated in them winning the Super Bowl. But it could also be a situation where it's like the last 5 years of the Ravens where they make the playoffs, but they don't win the Super Bowl. So we'll see on that front. So that's where my skepticism is rooted, where it's just like it's hard for me to be optimistic until we get all 3 of those people standing in front of a camera being introduced by the team and Arthur Blank and whatnot. And we're like, yeah, I get the vision now, right? That was a big part of Arthur Blank's press conference, having that vision. Until we get that vision, it's going to be hard for me to be optimistic at this point in time. But certainly a week, 2, 3 weeks from now, I could get there.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about this. Let's hold our thought on this, but definitely something that's worth talking about. And that is something that happened a couple of months ago, that started a couple of months ago, that now that we know about it, really probably gave the tea leaves of what was going to happen. We will take that under further review. This episode of our Squad Show is brought to you by FanDuel. The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action on game day, because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to the bets you like most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boost you want to apply. The boosts let you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback play, or coaching. The boosts give you more juice on the bets you already like instead of forcing you to bet something new. And every player feels bigger, and the boosts make your bets feel that way too. So you make your picks, then apply your profit boosts to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Try saying that 2 or 3 times in a row. Profit boost pack. Anyway, wanted to go back to something real quick that Arthur Blank talked about in the letter to his fans earlier this week, Aaron. He mentioned that with the help of Sportsology Group, the Falcons organization, quote, conducted a deep, thorough, and intentional health assessment of our entire football operations over the last 2 months. Blank went on to say, knowing adjustments across our operation are necessary to achieve our goals, we will be making significant changes. And of course, went on to announce Sunday night that they were moving on from the head coach and GM. And then, of course, as Jarvis mentioned earlier, there was an alluding to that even in the press conference today, because that speaks to one thing that they came away from, which was there really was not a clear vision. But when you think about the fact that Blank hired firms a couple of months ago, 2 months ago, before the season was over, to evaluate the health of the organization, do you think it was kind of a done deal to move on from Terry Fontenot and Raheem Morris long before Sunday night?
Probably. I think if you think about the timetable, let's imagine they hire these people November 1st, right? That would be 2 months before the season ends. Well, the first 6 games that they saw the Falcons play, they lost 5 of those games. So at that point in time, you're like, yeah, I don't think this is going to work, right? Like if you go into a building and you watch them lose 83% of their games, right, to start it off, you're probably not going to have a very positive first impression of the people that are running the business. And even though you get that sort of late season turnaround, they win the last 4 games in December, it's probably they had to dig themselves out of the hole, and they had dug themselves too deep a hole, I think, with some of those losses that we saw during that stretch to really dig themselves out of. And so because I think we expected Arthur Blank to be kind of the final decision maker, we gave Raheem and Terry much greater shot of being able to dig themselves out of the hole, because we know Arthur Blank has that sort of affinity for those people and wants to see them succeed. And we know he has shown in the past loyalty to these coaches with late season runs. So I think we gave it, myself included, more of a shot that they were going to keep the job at the end of the season based off of how they finish. But I think when you have that outside organization who has doesn't have that connection, and probably, as we have seen over the last couple of years, much to the chagrin of Falcon fans and media everywhere, like, the Falcons have not been a team that has been held up as like, oh, this is a perfectly one organization, that every time you hear NFL executives and NFL analysts and whatnot talk about the various moves that they have been making, they're always scratching their head and being like, they're doing weird stuff over there in Atlanta. And so when you have an organization coming outside the organization that probably thinks more like that than necessarily we believe in our guys, when you go out there and you lose the games that they were losing in the month of November and the beginning of December, it probably was a done deal. And in hindsight, that becomes a little bit more obvious than maybe it seemed in the moment when we didn't quite know all the machinations going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. And I would say too, Aaron, to that point, it's just one of those things where it's that primacy effect versus recency effect. And most of the time when you are in corporate America and consulting firm come in, they're coming in to clean house, and you have to do something overarching to make them say, oh no, we shouldn't clean house. So if you come through the doors and it's loss after loss after loss after loss, you kind of already are playing into the mindset that they're walking into the door with, which is that they think, hey, I'm supposed to be here to confirm that house needs to be cleaned. Tell me something or do something that makes me think otherwise. So you're right. Knowing now that they were in place 2 months ago, it doesn't kind of really matter what happened on the back half of the 2 months, because the front half of the 2 months seems to have already done them in, Terry Fontenot and Raheem Morris. But for you, Jarvis, does that kind of indicate to you as well? Like, we got the notification Sunday night that the organization was moving on, but this was probably a done deal several weeks before.
Yes, I think that was the case. And to be honest with you, just from a human perspective, like, they got to be rough. You're like, you got these people who you have no idea who they are. You don't know what their angles are. And like Free said, they're coming in to clean house. Like, that's a fair assumption. So, we know Terry and Rob are some intelligent guys. They understand it. They wouldn't be in those positions if they weren't, regardless of how you feel about the level of where they are as far as how good they are at their jobs. Like those, I'm sure they understand. I'm sure they understood long before the season was over with that this was probably getting ready to come to an end. And that's the unfortunate for them that, that was the case. But when you look at the totality of this particular regime, Terry and Raw, like, essentially the exact opposite happened last year, right? You were 6-3 at the top of the division. You swept the doggone the reigning divisional champs and the Buccaneers, and you just chopped it up to Kirk having some bad games, and you didn't dare to dig at all until it was pretty much a wrap for the season, and you depended on a rookie quarterback to try to come in and save the day. That is just so reactionary. And if I can define these two guys' regime, that would be my word: reactionary. Very reactionary. You can't be like that in this game, especially when you knew that more than likely, like, your job. We talked about Terry coming in, him being on the hot seat in 2025.
Yeah.
We talked about this. you know, this is some of the things that, that shouldn't be a surprise, to Falcons people, Falcons squad people, listeners, and everything, everydayers, all y'all. We've talked about, we've had these discussions. So I think that, yeah, to answer your question, yes, they probably should have known, or it was a fair assumption that they made when this new group of people came in with the suits and the ties. They had the white shirts and the black ties and the black pants. They simple, you know what I'm saying? They ain't got nothing flashy on. They coming in with the glasses. So Terry, what were you thinking when you spent $100 million and gave $100 million guaranteed bread to Kirk Cousins and then drafted the quarterback? He was going to have to explain that. I'm sure he had to explain that. It sounded good to Arthur. Like, oh, okay, I get that. Understand that. I've been the owner of this team for a very long time, and I don't want to be without a quarterback. I know what that life is like. But to a consultant, they don't have no feelings, none whatsoever. So when you think about it from that perspective and going through that, and you talking about 2 months before the season over with, and the GM was already on the hot seat just based off of all the things that we've been talking about over the past 2 years. Yeah, they had to know. They had to know, T. And that, to be honest with you, that would probably suck.
Yeah. It's not a pretty sight at all. Well, the Falcons also confirmed Sunday that searches for the head coach and GM roles would begin immediately. ZRG Partners will assist in the head coach search. Sportsology Group will assist with the GM role. So you can put your ZRG Partners hat on first, Aaron, and tell me. And we've got a load of our everydayers who are chiming in on this, so I can't wait for them to chime in more. But for you, if you had the hat on as ZRG Partners, who's your choice as next head coach?
It's a tough question, T.
What?
I mean,
profit is
yeah, because like I look at someone like John Harbaugh and I see the success, and I'm just like, yeah, I want that. But at the same time, at the end of the day, John Harbaugh is this quote unquote CEO type of head coach, where so much of what he needs to do to be successful is he's got to get the right coordinators. It's a similar conversation that we're having with Raheem, although Raheem is a defensive minded head coach. He came into the building with like, I'm going to delegate to other people. And so John Harbaugh is going to be the same way. And like, my challenge with that is like, that's a hard barrier to clear. Like we see when we look around the league, it's like Dan Campbell's the most successful, maybe Nick Sirianni's the most successful, maybe, or whatever, but it's like, I want someone with John Harbaugh's pedigree, but I also don't necessarily want a CEO type of head coach again.
Yeah.
And so I want a really competent coordinator where I know like, okay, well, we know this one side of the ball is taken care of, but there isn't a Ben Johnson, there isn't a Liam Cohen type of person available. And like, is the closest one Kevin Stefanski, is the closest one Clint Kubiak or somebody like that, or Vance Joseph or Jesse Minter. And it's like all of those guys are enticing, but like they don't wow me in a way that makes me go like, that guy is going to lead the Falcons to a promised land. So I say all that to basically say my default is kind of just John Harbaugh, just because I think he's the best of the options available. Yeah. But like even as much success John Harbaugh has had, I don't sit here and go like, oh yeah, that's a home run for the Atlanta Falcons, just because I think there are going to be challenges even with John Harbaugh and his success that, aren't necessarily guaranteed to be successful.
Yeah, because the toughest part is looking at some of the reports that have come out earlier this week about why the Ravens, or really their owner, Steve Bisciotti, decided to part ways. And it was because they couldn't decide on kind of how to proceed. Like, what was his game plan, John Harbaugh's game plan to reset the Ravens organization. And they really couldn't agree on where Todd Monken's place was in it all, and the Lamar Jackson and Todd Monken kind of disconnect, if you will, and how do you get that on track or get it back on track or what have you. So yeah, those are sort of some questions that you would have about John Harbaugh and whether or not he would bring to the table sort of the right people to be able to get this quarterback potentially on track, and this organization on track from the sideline. So yeah, not easy. And then, like you said, with the Clint Kubiak, probably for me, it's the pedigree that like his pedigree is starting to show itself in a good way, kind of like Kyle Shanahan, right? And so that's probably why I would lean towards him, because if Kyle Shanahan gave you just a little bit of what Mike Shanahan did and did, 49ers are going to be set for a minute. And then you think about Clint Kubiak, could he do what Gary was able to do pedigree wise? And he's starting to kind of show that he's got the ability and the potential to do it. But for you, Jarvis, you look across the space and you've got these hot candidates, so to speak, these hot coordinators, but then you have one or two coaches. And I'm going to throw a crazy one out at you guys before we wrap up, but we got one or two coaches that have been in the carousel before. They've been there, done that, and had success. Who would your guy be?
I don't know. I'm kind of like Aaron. I don't necessarily have a guy, but I have a couple of guys that I'm intrigued by. And I'm actually kind of surprised at myself about one of them. The one that I'm actually intrigued by the most, and I probably might regret this, but I'm just go ahead and say it. This is Mike McCarthy. Here's why.
I'm okay.
The man went 12-5, 12-5, 12-5, and then 7-10. Sure, that last doggone year. Yep, you have to take that into consideration. What happened, all that stuff. Without doing too much digging and just really just taking an assessment of how that organization has been run for quite some time, it was Gerald's fault. It was Gerald's fault. He's meddling. He wanted to do too much, dog. He wants to do too much. He wants to be involved. He wants to get all the credit. All that, man. Let Mike McCarthy cook, man. Like that's how I am with it. And you know what? And I'll take it a step further, T. You know, not only Mike McCarthy is the head coach. How about this? Mike talks to Jeff Ulbrich and say, you know what, man? Let's have a conversation. I want to talk to you. I want to see where you are. You know what I mean? And Jeff stays on staff. You know who else I wouldn't mind staying on staff? Dwayne Lefford.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like one of the best offensive line position coaches in the league. Hands down. I'll go to bat for him because I've seen it up close. I've seen how he's been able to work and how he's been able to develop guys and taking a low-level, center and the team entrusted him that, hey, this guy can be our starter. You don't have to pay Drew Dalman all that doggone money. Just trust in me, and I'll be able to bring him up to the level where he's actually sufficient in that particular role. So, yeah, that's where I am with as far as not necessarily my guy. I know it sounded like it, but he's the guy that I'm most intrigued by because of the success he's already had as a head coach, because I don't gravitate towards retreads, but I think Mike McCarthy might be a guy that you want to, as Arthur Blank would say, spend some time with and see if he's interested in taking the job.
Yeah. And I would say this, I think it'll be intriguing as well come Tuesday, because this is a year where, of course, we have a Monday night wild card football game. So Tuesday, you may have some other opportunities based on how things play out across the wild card weekend. Just saying.
Yeah, we want to talk about this. I know where you're going, T. I smell you, T.
So Jarvis, you want to hold him off until after break and
after break. Yeah,
because Aaron started smiling too, and so maybe I kind of like brought something up there that you guys might want to chat about, because I don't think necessarily that the future head coach for the Atlanta Falcons is a guy that is quote unquote currently available. But come Monday night around 11:17, we might be having a different conversation. Just saying. We'll talk about that on the other side. This episode of our Falcon Squad show is brought to you by Rocket Money. Let's be real. Managing your finances can feel overwhelming between subscriptions you forgot about, bills that keep going up, trying to figure out where all your money actually goes each month. It's easy to feel like you're losing control. And who has time to track every transaction or hunt down hidden fees? That's where Rocket Money comes in. The personal finance app that helps you take control. It finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. I was shocked when Rocket Money showed me that I was paying for like 2, maybe 3, because I've done it through Rocket Money before and kind of gotten them down. But there were still a few that I completely forgot about. And so that's already helped to save me some money. And you're going to love how it tracks all your subscriptions rather. And it's tracked mine too. And it'll let you cancel them right in the app with just a few taps. No more hunting down customer service numbers. So let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/locked-on. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. Automatic transaction categorizer, that's a game changer too, where you can finally see exactly where your money is going each month. So check it out at rocketmoney.com/locked-on. Hey guys, we are now joined as well by our sports anchor and reporter from 11 Alive, our girl Maria Martin. Maria, I want to pull you in right away and kind of get your thoughts in on the conversation. Let me just kind of give you a little bit of the back. Really, operations hats on, right? Because there will be a need to hire a head coach and a general manager. So the question was, if you are putting on your hat, your ZRG Partners hat, because of course they'll be in lockstep in hiring that head coach, who would you hire? But let me give you a caveat, Maria, that'll open it up for you. And then I'm going to open it back up for the guys. Don't just think about the coaches and the coordinators who are hot ticket items right now who are available. We got a wild card weekend coming up. And from now till
I know what you're getting at.
Yeah, Maria, because from Saturday to Monday, anything could happen. And there are some candidates that should some things not go so well, might actually be thrown into the mix for head coaching opportunities. So now that the pool has gotten a little bit bigger for you and you got that hat on, who might you want to go with for head coach?
I'm picking up what you're putting down. You're talking about LaFleur, whether or not the Packers would get rid of him.
Not just, but go ahead.
Okay, yes, LaFleur. Also, we're talking about Buffalo, I'm sure.
Yes, ma'am.
But so, for me, let's work under the assumption that Matt Ryan is hired by this football team, right? And this is somebody who obviously the Falcons fan base loves very dearly, and Matt is such a staple here in this city, would be great, even though he doesn't have front office experience. And according to Arthur Blank, I literally just got back to the station from Arthur Blank's press conference. Mm-hmm. The general manager and the head coach are going to report to this person, which we all think is going to be Matt Ryan. They are starting the interview process for the president of football literally today. Those interviews have probably already started. So let's work under the assumption that Matt gets hired, okay, for hypothetical situations. And I say this because I think that has a direct impact and effect. It obviously does, Indeed. But more than the way you just naturally think, okay, that's going to make an impact on who gets hired as the head coach. The reason why is that if they hire a first-time general manager, a first-time president of football role created essentially for what I believe is Matt Ryan, and then you go and you look at the head coach, you need someone with significant head coaching experience, period. And I know that Clint Kubiak is very exciting. And I do believe that Clint is probably going to be one of those guys that we're talking about a couple years down the line. He is a great offensive mind. He's the next great genius head coach, all these things. Remember the coaching cycle a couple years ago when we had all these young offensive minded guys, and the Falcons obviously missed out on all of those opportunities and hired Raheem Morris instead, which it is what it is at this point. I just think this time around, it is of the utmost importance that they hire someone with experience, because you've gone coordinator the last 2 times. Yes, Raw had previous head coaching experience in Tampa, but forget about that stint because I don't really think that he was in the same place as he is now. Sure. I want someone in here that knows how to run a program, that can also help guide a first-time general manager and Matt Ryan, because again, Matt doesn't have any of the experience that previous position would naturally be looking for. His experience is he wore the uniform for a ton of years and broke a lot of records and is beloved in the city. That's his experience. And look, Matt is an incredibly smart guy. I said it on our streaming show on 11 Alive the other day. Went to Boston College. He's incredibly cerebral. He's someone that can learn very quickly. He's still going to need the guidance of someone who's been around front offices and been in those situations for years and years and years. And so to me, it's paramount. And then to the second part of that, what's even more important to me right now is they get an offensive-minded coach in there to lead this team. I mean, point blank period. I need an offensive-minded coach. And we all know Raw didn't work for a bunch of different reasons, but they're at the point now where you're looking around at to Terry Fontenot's credit, what they've built on this offense. And you're saying, okay, yes, it's a little bit of a caveat and a weird year with the quarterback situation. You get the right head coach in here that knows how to work with this offense. The sky's the limit. The offense has fell so short of expectations the last 2 years with Zach Robinson, and Raheem Morris did not have as much influence on the offensive side of the ball as I would like the next head coach to. So for me, it's a head coach with a ton of experience and a head coach with offensive prowess. Those are my two requirements for the next head coach. And I think there's not a lot, but I think there's at least decent options out there right now. And then, of course, John Harbaugh, everyone is saying, why wouldn't he come to Atlanta? I think it's a very real possibility. But the thing with John Harbaugh is he's going to be able to tell whatever team he goes to, I'm doing this, I'm bringing this person, and I'm doing X, Y, Z. And so the Falcons are going to have to want to sign off on all of that stuff. And they're going to have a lot of competition as well. So I can't give you an exact name right now, just because, as you're mentioning, T, there are some other names that could filter into this coaching cycle. So I think the most important thing right now is getting that president of football established and then working from there, because I do believe that Mike McDaniel getting fired is the first of a bunch of different trickle moves by these head coaching vacancies that we will see, I think, a few more of. It's just never ending. It's bizarre.
Yeah, it is, because we're not even through the wild card round and there are already 8 openings, right? But there are questions about whether or not a Matt LaFleur survives with the Packers. There are questions on whether or not Sean McDermott survives if the Buffalo Bills do not. And there are questions, because there was a question Sunday night until about 11:17 on whether or not Mike Tomlin would survive, because really it was the going thought into that Sunday night game was whichever team doesn't survive, that coach doesn't survive. The Ravens didn't survive that pre-playoff game. Harbaugh didn't survive. Mike Tomlin is not off the hot seat. He's not off the hot seat.
Yeah.
So if they don't survive,
You're
talking to herself 100%.
I say, are you talking to yourself or are you telling us that?
I can tell the world. This is not new. World, you all know what I think.
What do you want to happen, T?
That's what I was going to say, Maria. But here's the thing. If I can be honest, and then I'm going to throw it back to you guys, because I want to give Jarvis and Aaron a chance to chime in as well on that pool of candidates that we just mentioned that may come up as a result of the results of Wild Card Sunday. But if I may be just 100% serious about Mike Tomlin, I do think that if the Steelers don't beat the Texans this weekend, it's going to be a mutual parting of ways. Like, I was shocked that John Harbaugh got fired, to be honest with you. I thought that was going to be that quote unquote mutual parting, but I feel like this could be that moment at which time Mike Tomlin ends up parting ways with the Steelers, but gets a job pretty much the next day, a la Tony Dungy, who I know got fired by the Bucs, but a la Tony Dungy or a la Andy Reid. So follow me real quick on this one. I think that there does come a time where even a Super Bowl caliber, Hall of Fame caliber coach has just gone as far as he can go with an organization. And that's what we saw with Andy Reid and the Philadelphia Eagles. Andy Reid took them to a Super Bowl. They got over that hump of the NFC Championship, but couldn't get a ring. He gets over to Kansas City, gets the right GM in place, by the way. And all of a sudden they have the right collaborative environment for him to thrive. And now we're talking about a 3-time Super Bowl champion, Andy Reid. So that's why I say, with Mike Tomlin, should things go awry with the Steelers this weekend and should there be a parting of the ways, he really would be a viable candidate, because sometimes that reset, even for a Jim Harbaugh, I still think that he's very viable, because he'd been 19 years in Baltimore as well. And so maybe that reset for him, going back to Maria's point, if everything else is in the right space, because your football operations president could be brand new, Matt Ryan, with no experience. So one of those other two needs to have deep experience. And I think with football operations being more of a strategic front office mind, then I think that head coach is probably the one of those final two that needs to have the deepest experience. And so I just wanted to say, on a serious note, that's why I was saying, hey, Mike Tomlin, Sean McDermott, Matt LaFleur, like those might still be viables, although Matt's not as, as accomplished, if you will, as say maybe a Jim Harbaugh or Mike Tomlin or even a Sean McDermott at this point. Jarvis, Aaron, I think you got to consider, ZRG partners with their hat on will have to consider, maybe we need to see what happens wild card weekend.
Can I say one thing really, really fast?
Yeah.
Really quick. One liner. The other attribute that I need in this head coach is no BS. Right? Like, I don't want them to be friends with the players. And that's not an indictment on Raw. I think that everybody loves him very much, but I just want someone who's going to come in here and make the tough choices, because I think for years this organization has been missing leadership at the top that was not willing to make the choices that needed to be made at the time they needed to be made. That's it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Maria.
Fair.
But I don't care about how the coach is with the players. Like, if he's cool with them, I'm cool with that. As
you could be cool, but not friends.
As long as you're willing to make those decisions. We talked about before you hopped on about the reactionary type of way this team was operating the past couple of years, whether it be Raw or Terry. Terry with the whole band-aids. He always trying to find a band-aid. Every free agency. Oh, need a pass rusher. Oh, let's go get Matthew Judon. Oh, we need a pass rusher again this year because Matthew Judon was awful. Let's go get Leonard Floyd. Nah, man, like, builds, coach, draft well, and you won't have to put band-aids on stuff. I'm with you. I'm with you wholeheartedly.
So is there a coach?
Make the right decisions,
So is there a coach from the wild card weekend? Should that coach or coordinator be made available that you would be looking at to say, hey, maybe that person's parting of ways in their old team makes way for them to become a new part of the Falcons? Jarvis, Aaron?
Jarvis, you answer? Because I do.
I would love to see Matt LaFleur walk through those doors. That would be great. That would be kind of like, cool, because, Dan didn't want to even interview the man for the OC gig when Kyle left. So that'd be kind of like some little redemption. I know Matt walk in with his chest real big. And then, with the relationship that he and Matt Ryan have, working under the assumption that he's going to be the president of football.
Right.
Football is all about relationships. I know people don't like to hear it, but this is what it is. You hire the people that you know. And I'm sure Matt and Matt will have a really good relationship. And if he were to lose his job, I would not be surprised at all that Matt pushes pounds of table for Matt LaFleur to come in here and to be the guy.
That's a good call. What about you, Free?
Yeah, I'm in a similar mindset because I have an affinity similar to what Maria says I would prefer an offensive-minded coach, because if you hit on that guy, you get a lot of stability, as we have seen. I believe I saw someone say that the last 6 Super Bowl winning coaches have been offensive-minded play callers and whatnot. I think that gives you a big leg up. And as Jarvis mentioned, that relationship that Matt Ryan has with him, that seems like it would be synergy there. So of that trio, Matt LaFleur, I think, is the most intriguing, but I also kind of think that he's probably the least likely of that trio to become available, just because I feel like a lot of all the stuff is really just like finagling for a contract extension. But we'll see. We'll see how that all plays out over the weekend.
Indeed. Well, you can keep your GM hats on or your president of football ops hats on, because, hey, there's a choice to make for a GM. We'll unpack that next up. This episode of our Falcon Squad Show is brought to you by Ultimate QB. Hey, guys, the draft picks positions are set, and so many teams are looking for their franchise QB. Ever wish to become a pro QB, getting drafted first overall? Raiders, you listening? Well, now you can. There's a mobile game just for you called Ultimate QB Football Legend. In this game, you step into the cleats of a number 1 draft pick quarterback, and it's your job to lead your team to greatness to help turn a failing franchise into a dynasty. This is the number 1 QB career mode game on the mobile app stores, and it introduces the most realistic environment with full career control. Sign contracts, train and upgrade yourself, build chemistry and evolve your teammates, give input to your GM on roster moves, play the actual games in 2D, and rise through the ranks to become a pro football legend. You'll deal with the ups and downs of a QB career, from rookie nerves to playoff drama, and every choice shapes your journey. Ultimate QB is totally free to play, has no ads, and works 100% offline. Perfect for when you want to sneak in a quick game or two on the go. So just head over to ultimate-qb.gm. That's ultimate-qb.qm, or search for Ultimate QB in your app store. And we've got something special just for you guys. Use the promo code Locked On, all caps, in the game store to get a free boost at the start of your career. Ultimate QB football legend, QB1, it's your legacy. GM, it's your legacy too. So Jarvis, now you got to put on your Football of Ops hat over at Sportsology Group hat. Who do you choose for next GM?
Woo! This is an interesting one, because a lot of times when you talk about who's responsible for what, especially when I just use Ian Cunningham for example, because that's the guy who I think will be the guy. I don't necessarily have a favorite guy, but when you think about some of the success that Chicago has had, like, all right, so was he part of the trade conversations that, Ryan Poles was that guy, right? I'm assuming that he's that. So you don't really know what they were responsible for when it comes to the place that they're coming from. So, but I think he is I had to kind of just look at the names, where he's been, what jobs he was in line for that he didn't necessarily get, but he was a strong candidate for. So I feel like Ian Cunningham is that guy. So we talk about relationships, connections, operating under the assumption that Matt Ryan's going to be the president of football, and Ryan Poles and Matt Ryan played together, and Ryan Poles has Ian Cunningham working up under him, so he knows what was the goings on and stuff, and Matt can kind of ask those questions that I just brought up. So I feel like Ian Cunningham would probably be that guy, and if the Falcons hired him, I'd be like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Aaron, what about for you? Who'll be your pick for GM?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Ian Cunningham just because he's like the only name that we know. But I also think at this point in time, I think he's a good option. He's a good first option based off, we'll see what other names emerge in the coming days and weeks, probably once they get this, president of football job sort of probably secured over the weekend, as it sounds like that's the plan. But as I said earlier, I feel like Ian Cunningham, because he has that background in Baltimore, that background in Philadelphia, and you saw this reflected with how Chicago operated, where you look at their ability to trade back and that sort of data-driven approach, which basically, as I've talked about on Locked On Falcons, that when you look at the history of the draft, drafting is hard. It's a crapshoot. It's one of those things where the teams that typically draft well are the teams that get more swings at the bat, rather than teams that are just uniquely gifted at being able to evaluate players over another team. And you look at the Bears the last couple of years with Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham, they've done a lot of trading back, right? Last year, I believe they traded 3 times in the draft. All 3 of those times they traded back. The previous year, I think the only trade that they had was also a trade back. And then you had 2023 where they had the number 1 pick and they traded that for a buttload of picks. And ultimately were able to land their franchise quarterback. And that to me is the approach that I would like to see the next Falcons GM have moving forward, which is much more we're going to trade back as opposed to trade up, because I also am of the opinion that I think the Falcons aren't just 1 or 2 pieces away, which is how they've been operating the last couple of seasons. I think there are several pieces away. There's 1 or 2 maybe big pieces that they need to sort of fill, but there's 3, 4, 5 other pieces that they need to stop ignoring and stop being that reactionary thing that Jarvis was talking about earlier in the show. So Ian Cunningham seems to check all those boxes because he's the only person that has been mentioned as a candidate. Seems like a pretty good option to me, but we'll see. Maybe another guy will emerge, and when we're doing the squad next week, I'll have a different answer for you.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking too, Maria. As you look at it today, kind of the candidate that has emerged for GM, who's your front runner today?
This is even harder for me to answer because I really think that getting the president of football in there, which Arthur continued to say, it's president of football, not president of football operations. This is Arthur Blank's words, not mine. So getting the president of football in there first, I think is very important. And then let's say they all have a collective agreement that there is a veteran head coach that they want to hire. A lot of times, similar to what I said about John Harbaugh, a lot of times these guys that have years and years of NFL head coaching experience have their own idea of who they want to be their general manager. Now, whether or not teams will sign off on bringing both of them with the head coach, that's up to obviously the teams, but that throws a little wrinkle in this general manager spot, because if you're going to go up and coming offensive coordinator or up and coming defensive coordinator, giving them an opportunity to be a head coach for the first time, you have a little bit more leverage on who you're going to hire as your general manager. However, if you do have someone who has a caveat, like who cares about the money if you're Kevin Stefanski and John Harbaugh? What you care about is the people that are leading the team alongside with you. And they may have a strong opinion in that. And so let's say the Falcons are going to die on the hill of, we got to get one of these veteran head coaches. And they may come to them and say, well, guys, there's 7 other openings and they're going to let me take my GM with me. Will you guys do the same? So it's a little bit harder for me to answer just because of that little caveat. Ian Cunningham, obviously the connections, as Jarvis and Aaron had pointed out. Ryan Poles and Matt were not only former teammates, they are best friends. These guys are really, really, really close, right? So I think just knowing that, it is all about relationships. It's all about who you know. Giving Ian Cunningham an opportunity he's been trying to get for years now, has been a finalist, as Jarvis mentioned, for a couple of different general manager openings, just hasn't worked out for Ian to this point. But the only thing that would give you a lot of solace in that, okay, first-time GM in a team that really wants to take the next step, yikes, like, are we going to go through this again in the next 2-3 years? What gives you peace in that is that he is learning under someone like Ryan Poles, who has turned this Bears team around, and they've come from the bottom and now look at where they are. And they are a completely different team than even we talked about 2 years ago when we were all up in arms about the Justin Fields situation up there in Chicago. So I think that him being a first-time general manager will work if you have other veterans around him. That's my caveat to that situation with Ian. But I still think it's going to be president of football first, which Arthur pretty much said today that they were going to focus on that first, because if it's a veteran head coach, he might say, I'm not coming to Atlanta unless I'm allowed to bring my guy. And that could very well happen.
Yeah, it definitely could in the case of Harbaugh as an example. But real quick, guys, Jarvis, when you look at this head coaching position, like I mentioned earlier, 25% of the jobs in the league are open at this point, and that could jump up to a third by the end of wild card weekend. But ultimately, as it sits today, is this Falcons job one of the more appealing ones? Like, is this one of those top 3 out of the 8 that are open?
I would say it's probably top 3 for now, right? Because before John Harbaugh got fired, I was like, I would have said that with a lot more confidence. But to me, I think that when you look at the pieces that are on offense, the pieces that are on the defense side of the football, now the salary cap, it's going to have to be some finessing going on, because they already have done what they were supposed to do as far as like setting up for Kirk to be cut once the new league year kicks in. So there's that piece of it, and you have to understand what the time frame in which Michael Penix is going to be healthy. He's not going to be able to work out, when he's going to be ready. That's one thing. And given what Arthur Blank said today, he believes that Penix still can be the franchise quarterback of this team. So with that being said, and I think so too, I think that's still a possibility. With the injury, even with the injuries included in that conversation. Yeah, I think that this Falcons team is right there on the cusp of being a top 3 team post John Harbaugh being fired.
Fair enough. What about you, Free? When you look at the fact that there are 8 head coach openings right now, of course, we put emphasis on right now. Do you look at this Falcons opening and say, hey, I think there's Miami Dolphins, just in case anybody was wondering what those were, Arizona Cardinals, Cleveland Browns, the Falcons, of course, as we mentioned, the Titans, the New York Giants, the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Baltimore Ravens. There's your 8. Falcons in the top 3 of those as far as attractive positions in the league?
Yeah, I think you can put the Falcons in the top 3. I think Baltimore's clearly number 1, right? Sure. Where it's like, hey, we can go win a Super Bowl next year if you play your cards right. I think the Falcons are in the top 3 mostly because you look at they have the path of least resistance because they play in the NFC South. So they're probably the second most likely team that you would sit there and say can make the playoffs. I think the real challenge for the Falcons and the thing that may deter some candidates and why other teams may be a little bit more attractive to them, again, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, is the questions around the quarterback position, right? You have some of those teams picking at the top. The Raiders have the number 1 pick. They have an opportunity to get their quarterback. We don't know with the Falcons. As Jarvis said, like Arthur Blank said, he believes Michael Penix is a franchise guy. Whether or not the people that they bring into the building are going to agree with that sentiment, it's going to play a part over whether or not Penix will get that opportunity. But we expect to see Michael Penix play at some point in 2026. But if that doesn't break the way that you want to break, are you back in the quarterback market in 2027? Where are you drafting a guy? Are you signing a guy? Do you go out this offseason and get your guy now as opposed to waiting and seeing on Michael Penix? All of those are questions hanging over the organization. And I think that's going to be the one thing that for some candidates, they may be like, look, I need to have a quarterback. We saw this with John Harbaugh's brother, Jim, last year, where it was like, I only got eyes for the LA Chargers because Justin Herbert. And we're talking to the Atlanta Falcons just to get the Chargers to up their offer a little bit. And so I could see other candidates this cycle doing that with Atlanta, where it's like, I feel I can get my quarterback easier in another place. Obviously, Baltimore already has their guy, but I think that's really going to be the thing that will deter guys. But I think overall, when you look at the Falcons right now with their ability to win right now, they're probably in the top 3.
Yeah. And would you say, Maria, that the Falcons are the top 3 in terms of appealing jobs that are open in the NFL right now at head coach?
Yeah, there's no doubt that I believe that the Falcons is a very appealing job. I've illustrated that, I think, on social media over the last week that, I think this is a very attractive job for any coach, whether it be an experienced coach or it's obviously an attractive job for someone who wants a first-time head coaching experience. Anyone would take that at that position. But even for these experienced head coaches who will have their options, for a lot of different reasons. Number one, your division is garbage. You're sending an 8-9 team to the playoffs, and you have an opportunity with a very good roster, albeit there are a couple of pieces that, Aaron kind of mentioned as well. You are a little bit further away than you'd like to be, but you're not that far away from making the playoffs. So at least just making the playoffs, you do that in your first or second year here as a head coach, and oh my gosh, this is the greatest hire of all time. This team has not seen the playoffs in 8 straight years. And so for me, I go somewhere where the bar is incredibly low. And if you're a guy, I hate to keep using John Harbaugh as an example, but I'll throw Kevin Stefanski in there too, just for fun. Okay. If you're either one of those guys, and these are just kind of the available seasoned head coaches, if you will, I don't want to throw Mike McDaniel in this for now. So those 2 guys who have had long tenures and long-standing head coaching positions, you see a place like the Atlanta Falcons and you say, all I got to do is make the playoffs with that roster in my first year. Forget about it. I'm in. And that's what I think.
Cleveland to the playoffs.
And that's what I think. But that's what I think is really going to be important for some of these veteran head coaches too. And yes, you guys are right. I think the quarterback position is sigh, because when Michael Penix Jr. comes back, which it's going to be at some point during the season, a couple games in, obviously. And Arthur Blank isn't going to sit there and tell you the guy that we drafted when we had Kirk Cousins sitting there is not he's never going to say that. He's never going to say this guy is not our franchise quarterback. The belief still has to be there because it was such a high risk decision that if you don't back it at this point, what are we even doing if you're in the front office role? So yeah, I mean, and the hope, even for all of us sitting here, we hope that he works out to be everything that all of us believe. We believed so much in Michael Penix Jr. when he was drafted, still thought that he was the best pick in that year's draft class for quarterbacks. But unfortunately, his middle name has been injuries his entire career. And unfortunately, it happened again for him here. So I think that the right coach will see that as a challenge and not, how can I put this? See it as a challenge, but not a reason not to take the job, right?
Not a deal breaker.
And especially just the fact that you have so much young talent as a core to this team, the sky's the limit, I think, when you're an experienced head coach. So yeah, I think it's an attractive job. Come on down to Atlanta, make it to the playoffs, make everybody happy, and start taking this team in the right direction.
Yeah. And when you look at the top 8 jobs that are open, I'm not sure how you could say that this job wouldn't be in the top 3 all things given. Thanks to our everydayers for making the Falcon Squad Show your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked On Falcons with your host, Aaron Freeman, as your second listen. The Falcon Squad Show and Locked On Falcons are part of the Locked On Podcast Network every day. We're your team. See you next time.